Hey, I'm Emma. I taught in classrooms for over 8 years. And guess what? My paras were my top resource. And today, I'm going to help you become one. This video is going to prepare you for the Praxis ParaPro. And this video is going to cover 3 things: what's on the test and how to study for it, the most likely concepts that you'll need to know, and we're going to look at a few practice questions. Ready to dive in? Me too. Let's jump into it. Now, the Praxis ParaPro consists of 3 content categories: reading, mathematics, and writing. Each has 30 questions and is worth 1/3 of your test. Most people fear the math section the most, so let's start there and come back to reading. You'll see number sense and basic algebra, geometry and measurement, and data analysis. And yes, you have to solve math problems. And guess what? No calculator allowed. Look, if you're rusty on math, you can brush up. Later in this video, we'll solve some problems together. But first, let's look at some topics you're most likely to see here, starting with number sense and basic algebra. You may already know what's coming in the algebra part. Remember when your math teacher kept asking you to find x? Then there was always that kid in your class that just circled the letter x in the problem and said, "Here it is." Except we're going to actually solve the problem. You'll need to know the basic principles of algebra that allow you to rearrange equations to solve for x. Then we get to the number sense requirement. Number sense is just a fancy way of asking, how do numbers relate to each other? This includes making sure you know how to use the order of operations, arrange positive and negative numbers, fractions, and decimals from smallest to largest, calculate percentages, and use basic mathematical symbols like greater than or less than. So for example, you might be given a problem and need to use the order of operations to solve for the correct answer. Trying to solve the problem without using the order of operations would leave you with the wrong answer. So it's all about knowing which step to do first. To make sure you solve problems in the right order, remember PEMDAS. Next up is geometry and measurement. Geometry is another one of those terms that can strike fear into the hearts of all who read it. But it may be better to just think of geometry as the study of shapes. You'll need to be able to identify basic shapes and calculate their perimeter, area, and volume, as well as graph them on a coordinate plane. So if you're given a shape and its outside measurements, you may be asked to solve for the area or perimeter. To do this, you'll need to know the basic formulas for calculating area, perimeter, and volume of common shapes. As for the measurement portion, you'll need to convert between units in the same system. So from inches to feet or minutes to hours. All right, only one piece of math to go: data analysis. I know the term data analysis sounds really intense and scientific, but you already do this all the time in real life. Anytime you look at a graph of the temperature for the day or split the bill at dinner, that's data analysis. So data analysis requires you to, well, analyze data. You might be given a data set and need to calculate the mean, median, mode, or range. Or asked to choose the best type of graph to represent the data. Hey, is it data or data?
Yes.
You could be given a graph and asked to interpret what the graph is showing you about a data set. I'm going with data. And here's a tip. You'll probably get mostly graphs and charts to look at. For instance, you may be shown a graph like this one and asked which type of movie is the most popular among children. First, make sure you know what you're looking at. Then, read the chart. Or you might have to use the numbers from the chart to do a simple calculation. All right, math's over. Whew. Okay, now let's look at reading. Officially, the 2 areas of reading are reading skills and knowledge, and application of reading skills and knowledge to classroom instruction. I can read, but those don't make sense. Okay, so let's fix these. Can you read? Can you help students read? Much better. And when asked if you can read, the most important thing to do is identify the main idea and the primary purpose of the text. You're going to see questions that ask you that directly. And you're also going to have questions where you need to know that to answer the actual question. Now I bet you're like, okay Emma, what's an actual question? I'm on it. Simply put, the main idea is the point. The primary purpose is the why. So for example, if I write a short essay on how to make a 3-layer chocolate cake, my main idea is how to make a chocolate cake. And my primary purpose is to get you to bake me a cake. Okay, focus. Remember, you'll be asked about passages, but always first figure out the main idea and purpose. Need practice on this? our study guide gives you some tips. The study guide has a lot of them. Do you just want to see one right now? Oh, what the heck, I'll show it to you right now. But we've put the link to our study guide in the description below, so you can subscribe after you finish this video. Here we go. Read the passage, summarize it to a friend. Check the first and last sentence. Pick a choice that summarizes the whole passage. And remember, you will have to expand upon the main idea and purpose to answer some questions. For those, you'll have to identify supporting ideas, analyze the organization, determine the meaning of words, draw an inference or implication, decide if something is fact or opinion. If only there was someone who had created tips and examples of each of these skills, and maybe had them all available as videos? Anyway, these are the skills they'll test to make sure you can read. Moving on to the other half of this domain. Can you help students read? There are two parts here. One, can you support the teacher in building foundational reading skills? Two, can you support the teacher in building reading comprehension skills? I'll give you a secret for that second one. A lot of those questions are just reading comprehension again. But now, instead of asking you directly, they ask you what a student should say. It's the same answer. So what about foundational reading skills? These questions will make sure you have these skills. So you'll see questions asking you to identify a vowel or a pair of synonyms or a pair of words that rhyme. You might be required to alphabetize a list, and don't be surprised if there's a question asking you what a specific suffix means. Essentially, prefixes and suffixes modify a word called a root. Let's see this in action. Let's look at the word accept, which is to agree to take something. That can be a root. If we add the prefix un, that flips the meaning. And if we add the suffix able, that changes the overall word from a verb to an adjective. What did you just throw at me?
Oh, it was a pencil. I'm really sorry, Emma.
So, using what we just learned, I accept the apology, but it's unacceptable to throw a pen at me. You'll often see these paired with a reading, where it asks for the right student answer. And that's it for reading. Last is writing. Don't worry, you don't actually have to write anything for this test. It's all multiple choice. This category sounds a lot like the reading category. It's broken into writing skills and knowledge, and application of writing skills and knowledge to classroom instruction. Just like the reading category, this simplifies to can you write and can you help students write? But again, you don't actually have to write. For the first part, you'll just identify errors or elements of other people's writing. For the second part, you'll identify ways to improve student writing. Let's zoom in on the first. You will see snippets of writing and be asked to identify errors and elements related to mechanics. This means you won't focus on the content of the writing, but instead on the grammar, word usage, punctuation, sentence parts, parts of speech, and spelling in the snippets. Wait, proper word usage? Proper spelling? Now, should you spend your time memorizing the spelling of every single word in the English language? Absolutely not. The words that will come up on your ParaPro exam are different from the words you'd practice if you were preparing for a spelling bee. Think about commonly used but often misused words like it's and its, your and your, than and then, there and there. Make sure you understand the different uses of these words, and if you don't, we have that covered for you in our study guide. You may also be asked directly to identify a misspelled word, but these words don't look too scary. But hey, if spelling's just not your thing, no worries. You can get some practice with our study guide. Let's take a look at that part of speech bit. There are a few types of words most likely to come up. If you're rusty here, brush up. Take a look at the parts of speech labeled in the sentence, "The playful pandas roll skillfully down a hill because they can." We have even more detailed information ready for you in our study guide. Let's take a look at the second part of this category. Can you help students write? These questions will usually involve scenarios in which students are working on a piece of writing. You'll either be asked about the writing process or writing applications. The writing process refers to the stages students go through to develop a written piece. Questions in this part of the category will typically ask you the best way for the student to improve their writing. For example, based on what they've written so far, which choice would be the best word or sentence to add, change, or delete? The ParaPro exam defines writing applications as writing for different purposes. Basically here you'll need to show that you can help students understand the different types of writing and what they're used for. You'll need to know types such as narrative, persuasive, and informative, and how to match them to an audience. All through the lens of helping students with their writing, of course. Now, you could spend time Googling these different writing types, but again, to really have the confidence you deserve, go subscribe to a 240 study guide. You can get the study guide for the Praxis ParaPro Assessment. Now that we've gone over some of the big concepts in our 3 areas, let's look at some practice questions to show you how those concepts can appear on the test. If you want a lot of practice questions, you can click the free practice test below. At the end, you get a score report on how well you did on the test. And then you can subscribe to 240 and get all the practice questions you need to be 100% confident for the test. Did I mention the 240 study guide has a money-back guarantee that you'll pass? Now for questions. Remember for math I told you we were going to have to solve problems with no calculator? Let's look at one of those number sense and algebra section questions. Here's an expression we need to simplify to a single number. Now we need to make sure we follow PEMDAS, the order of operations. There's no parentheses nor exponents, so we can skip that. There's only one multiplication, which is -2 times 50. Now we just have addition and subtraction, so we solve left to right, and we end up with 0. All right, time for a question from geometry and measurement. We're told the west wall of a square room has a length of 13 feet, and they want the perimeter of the entire room. Well, squares have 4 sides of equal measure, so the perimeter, the area around the figure, would be 4 times 13, which is 52. And to wrap up math, let's look at a chart-based problem for the data analysis section. This problem gives us survey data, a pie chart, and asks how many students chose basketball as their favorite sport. I see an 8% in the wedge for basketball, so I'm going to pick that choice. Ah, rats, that seemed too easy. Since 150 students were asked, the percentage doesn't equal the number of students. Instead, we need to multiply the percentage by the total. So 8% times 150. While I don't get a calculator, the mental math here is pretty easy. For the first 100 students, that 8% is the same as 8 students. For the remaining 50, it'd be half, so another 4 students, giving us 12 total. Now, let's look at some reading questions. First up, questions aimed at can you read? In 1804, President Thomas Jefferson sent Meriwether Lewis and William Clark on a very difficult expedition. He wanted them to explore the massive 828,000 square miles of territory west of the Mississippi that the United States had bought from France for $15 million. The deal between Jefferson and the French Emperor Napoleon was known as the Louisiana Purchase. It doubled the size of the United States. Lewis and Clark and their Corps of Discovery were charged with finding a route from the east through this enormous and uncharted new terrain all the way west to the Pacific Ocean. Opening a route to the west would increase trade opportunities with China, particularly for the lucrative fur business, and Jefferson needed his purchase to pay off. However, in order to succeed, the explorers needed to interact with Native American tribes they did not know and whose language they did not speak. They had to pass over treacherous mountains and rivers that were unfamiliar to them. To complete the job, Lewis and Clark relied on the tracking, language, and negotiation skills of a Native American woman, Sacagawea. Pretty informative. Let's see what questions we need to answer about it. Which of the following is the main idea of this passage? To explore the land to the west of the Mississippi, Lewis and Clark relied on help from the Native American woman, Sacagawea. President Jefferson hired Meriwether Lewis and William Clark to explore Louisiana Purchase and chart a route from the east to the Pacific Ocean. Thomas Jefferson felt pressure to demonstrate the value of the Louisiana Purchase after acquiring it from France for $15 million. Meriwether Lewis and William Clark were hired to help him demonstrate the importance of this new land. Difficult terrain and frequent conflict with Native Americans made it difficult for Lewis and Clark to explore the West. Knowing the importance of this task, the two men depended on help from Sacagawea, a Native American woman. This option is the best choice because it addresses the primary focus of the passage overall. While all of the other answer choices present facts and details from the passage, none of them can stand alone as the main idea of both paragraphs in the passage. What about those teaching to read questions? What did those look like? Oh look, same reading. The paraprofessional asks the students to give the primary purpose of paragraph 2. Which response from the students is the most accurate? Notice this is really just a reading question. We could cross out the start of the prompt, and it's just asking for paragraph 2's purpose. Okay, let's see our choices. To provide a description of the fur trade, to provide a description of the Native American tribes and their languages, to explain the importance of the Louisiana Purchase and the need for Sacagawea's aid, to explain the role of Lewis and Clark in the core of discovery. This is the correct choice. The author establishes the importance of the Louisiana Purchase by noting that it would increase trade opportunities with China. In addition, he shows the need for Sacagawea's aid by revealing the difficulty of the journey and the communication problems with Native American tribes. And what about those questions related to foundational reading skills? What do those look like? Again, a lot will be paired with a reading, and you'll be picking the student's right answer. But let's look at a straightforward one. A teacher has her students find synonyms from a passage. Which pair is best? Synonyms are words with the same meaning, so it's this one. Start and stop are opposites, so they are antonyms. And flare and flare sound the same, so they are homonyms, but they do not mean the same thing. And this choice looks tempting, but plants are a category and grass is an example. Now for the writing category. In the first example, we'll see there will be a sentence with certain parts underlined. Our job is to identify the underlined portion that contains the error. Let's take a look. The students had been studying for their Latin test for 6 hours without a break when they decided to call it a day. This is the correct answer. Break, spelled this way, B-R-A-K-E, is a device used for stopping. For this sentence, we need to use the other form of break, spelled B-R-E-A-K, which means to pause. Let's look at a question based on a student writing sample. The following passage was written by a student. Here I am, dozing off in my language arts class again. You might think I hate this class, or maybe I just have the most boring teacher ever. Or is it right after lunch and I'm just feeling full and groggy? None of these explain my sleepiness. I'm too tired to participate in my favorite class because school starts too early in the morning and I am too tired to participate. The school board for our district should start the school day later in the morning so all students can get the rest they need. Which transition inserted into the beginning of sentence 4 would be most appropriate? Here's the right answer. Let's read sentence 4 again with this transition inserted. Unfortunately, none of these explain my sleepiness. This makes sense because the true reason for the writer's tiredness is something more widespread, impacting many students, and was not addressed prior to sentence 4. Now, that felt like a lot, but it was just a small sliver of practice questions to give you an idea about how these concepts are assessed on the ParaPro test. Congratulations on finishing the video! If you found it helpful, give it a like. There's still plenty more to learn. Did you know that thousands of paras have passed their certification tests by using our study guides? Passing the Praxis ParaPro exam can be your ticket to getting into the classroom and making a difference. If you really want to make sure you're prepared for it, take the next step and subscribe to the 240 Study Guide. It has hours of videos, so you can watch and/or listen while doing chores. It's test-aligned, so you know precisely what you need to study. And it has hundreds of practice questions, so you can be sure you are ready. And it has a money-back guarantee, so click the link below right now to get started.